Hello guys, Smart Polly here, welcome back to another video. Today I will be showing you how to create your own massive multi-biome open world map. This map will feature different biomes or regions such as canyons, grasslands, mountains, and more. We will start by creating our own landscape in World Machine, exporting it into Unreal, and setting up our own landscape material using some of Quixel Megascan's textures. This will probably be a 3 or 4 part tutorial series, as I will later show on how to set up procedural grass, trees, rocks, as well as a few other things. So guys, if you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and without further ado, let's get right into the video. Okay, so first off, we will be starting here in World Machine, professional version. If you don't have World Machine, then you don't have to worry, because I will provide all the project files to download the map in the description below. So I'm going to briefly touch over my World Machine map here. I'm not exactly going to show a step-by-step process on how I made my landscape. If you guys want to see something like that, just let me know in the comments down below. I basically started out with a little drawing that I made of my landscape in Photoshop. I divided it up into grids, outlined all the different areas of my map, just to give me a basic idea of what it will look like. So I started off first by making a new layout to give a basic shape of the landscape. Then I combined that with mountains, hills, forests, and canyons. Basically, I just drew a mask for each layout, just added it using combiners. This allowed me to pretty much choose where exactly I want my mountains on the landscape. It's pretty straightforward. So I can show you guys, this is basically what I have set up here. I have the basic shape. So as you can see here, it's just the basic shape of the landscape. Then we have the mountains, which is a new layout. Then I'm using an advanced purlin with an erosion, and I combine that, the mountains, to the overall landscape. Then here we have hills, the hill purlin, which is basically just billowy style hills with an erosion and combining that to the landscape. And then you can see here it kind of repeats. I have the forest, which is just some smaller mountains with an erosion, combining that to the overall landscape. And finally the canyons, which is actually a bit more different. I inverted everything and I drew these little canyons. Then I have some erosion on that. And I have a mask for only the canyons area, so that basically we have only that area masked out. Okay, and I have it all added to this final combiner and to this height output, which is just set as a raw 16. Okay, so this is basically the overall map that I've created. Now, I'm not the best at World Machine here, so obviously you'd want to have more breakup in these mountains, more variation. You can always do that in your grid here and add more combiners, more filters, and all that stuff. So now I'm going to show you guys how I got all of my height map outputs for all of the materials. Basically, since this map has different regions like the canyons and the mountains, it has to have essentially different layers for these areas, because we're going to add different materials for these different biomes. How I have that set up is I have a slope selector and I have that to a height output. It's pretty simple. Basically, it just takes the slope of a given area and gives a height output. And basically what you have to do to find the perfect slope is you want to select the slope and basically just trial and error it back into the engine. I did this for a couple hours just trying to get the proper slopes set up for all the different materials. Just seeing which high outputs look the best and messing around with the material in Unreal. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a total of 13 outputs here. For material maps. First up, we have the mountains. We have 3 different height outputs. One for our grass, our darker grass color. One for our lighter grass color. And one for our rock texture. Something important I want to tell you guys is that I'm using the masked input right here on the select slope from the mountain's layout or map. This allows you to only get the slope of the mountains area, because if you didn't have this set up like that, as you can see here, it's going to do the entire landscape, which is what we don't want. We want only the mountains area. That's what I did for every one of these layers. This is for the hills, this is for the forest, and then this is for the canyons. This one I'll discuss in a second. And then we have the sand right here. Basically, you just want to have all the heights, all your maps, only export the areas that they're assigned to. So again, hills for the hills and so on. And I will leave this World Machine file in the description below to download so you guys can analyze it more. And again, if you want a full rundown of how to create something like this, just let me know in the comments down below. Last up, one thing I want to tell you guys about is this little thing that I have here. I take the entire map of our landscape and I basically subtract the mountains, the hills, the forests, the canyons from that height map. So as you can see here, that way we get all the regions that aren't textured, that don't have a height map output, and we export that as a height map. If you don't have any data or any paint data in your maps when you import it to Unreal, it's going to make the landscape black, certain tiles of that landscape black. So this is just a quick fix that will make sure that your entire landscape at least has some sort of paint or texture onto it. That way parts of the landscape don't have black spots. Alright, lastly up we have the sand height, or the sand map, which again you'll have to test with your height outputs. Okay, so let's talk about my landscape size. Basically, I started out as a 8x8 kilometer map and based my landscape mainly off of my drawing in Photoshop. So I just took, the normal size, 8x11 tiles, multiply that so I can get an 88 kilometer by 88 kilometer landscape. As far as my tiled build options goes, I did a 11 by 11 tile landscape. I unchecked the always output all tiles and I only selected these middle ones because these tiles on the sides actually don't have any information that's important. And then as for my tile resolution, I did 2017 by 2017. That's pretty much all my export settings. As far as my height map, again, it is raw 16. And all of my texture maps here are PNG. And as you can see here, I named them all. Got the Mount Rock, Mount Grass, and so on. When I hit the tiled build option, it's going to export the region, 11 by 11 tiles. And then we have 14 outputs here, which are all the texture outputs. So I've already exported this map. You guys can go ahead and download it in the description below. Basically, this is what you're going to see. We have all the different layers here. You can see all the names, and then at the very bottom here we have all the height maps for the landscape. Alright, so for my Unreal project, I'm using a modified version of the Community Ocean project for 4.25, which is this splash example, which this guy has generously created. Basically, it's just an updated version of the Ocean project. Works for the launcher version of Unreal, so you guys don't have to, build the engine from the source code or do any of that fancy stuff. You just clone and download it and open it up with 4.25. But of course, you can always download the environment project, the ocean project. So I'll leave both of these down in the description below. Also, if you are using the splash example here, the project doesn't come with any third-person blueprint or starter content. You just go to add a feature or content pack and you add the third-person blueprint as well as starter content. So now what we need to do is set up our material before we can import our landscape into Unreal. Go ahead and open up Quixel Bridge. Basically, we're going to use some of the Quixel Bridge textures for our landscape material. Now, you need a bare minimum of 14 textures if you want to use all of the height maps that I have provided. First up, for our grass master, we are using the dried grass on moss right here. As for our sand, we're using the Thai beach sand right here. As for the hills dark grass, we're using the clover patches on grass. And then for the hills light grass, we're using basically the same texture, but I'm just going to add a tint to it in the material. As for the hills rock, I'm using this slate rock here. Then for the mountain grass, the dark grass, I'm using again the dried grass on moss, which we had before. And then for the mountain light grass, I'm also using the dried grass on moss. As for the mountain rock, I'm using the slate rock again. If you want, you can use a different texture if you want for your mountains, if you don't want it matching the hills rock. As for our canyons, for our canyon bot texture, we are using this soil sandy. But just note, when you import it to Unreal, it's going to have a different name. It's just going to be named muddy ground, just a heads up. Okay, as for the canyon top texture, we're using this rock cliff right here. Really, any rock texture will work. As for the canyon side, we are using something more broken up like this, which is the layered rock cliff. This will be our texture for the sides of the canyon. For our forest bot texture, we are using again the dried grass on moss. And then finally, for our forest top material, we are using the wild grass. Okay, so once you guys have downloaded all of those to your library, you just want to export that. So just go to export settings, select your engine version, and then set your project location, where your project is located on your hard drive, and click export for all of the materials. Now, I did get a couple of more materials, more than the bare minimum of 13. I got an extra 3 just for later when I want to paint extra materials onto the landscape. Of course, you can always go back and add more as you want, but the ones that I got were this Thai beach sand, this castle floor stone for like a, cobblestone pathway on the landscape, and then this forest path as well for like a pathway in the forest. So I can basically add these as extra layers that I can paint on later on in the map. Now that we have all of our materials imported, let's make a new landscape material. Just make a new material, call it m_landscape material, open it up, and then we're going to go ahead and create a new landscape layer blend. We will give this landscape layer blend a bare minimum of 13 input nodes. I actually add up to 16 because again, I added an extra few layers for the dirt path and for the cobblestone path and for the sand. Now things are going to get a bit messy. Typically you would use material functions to collapse everything up, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to hook everything up. Okay, so first you want to rename all of the layers here. So I have a screenshot of all the list of the layer names. You can follow this order if you want, it really doesn't matter. Just note for the first one, we're going to name it Grass Master, and the first blend type is going to be the alpha blend. And then for the rest of these, you can just leave it as the default weight blend. Okay, so I'm just going to put up a little key on the screen that's just going to show all the names of my layer blend in order. And keep in mind that I also do add 3 extra layers just as extras that I can paint later on the landscape. So just go ahead and pause the video and rename all your layers. Alright, when you are all finished, we can go ahead and start setting up the pixel depth offset. This will prevent obvious tiling of the textures. This will fade a smaller close-up texture with a larger farther out texture. Okay, so just add a pixel depth. You want to subtract a constant value of 5,000. And then you want to divide that subtract by a constant value of 7,500. And then you want to add a clamp. And then you're going to hook this clamp up to a linear interpolate. And you're going to hook this up to the alpha, unhook the A right there. Then you're going to hook up the lerp into the layer grass master. Now we can start dragging our textures into our material. First up, for our grass master, we are going to be using the dried grass moss. Go ahead, drag that in, hook it up to the A, copy, paste it again, hook that up to the B. Then we're going to add a landscape layer coordinates, hook that up to the UV here, and we're going to change the mapping scale to 5. Copy, paste that, and then we're going to hook this up to the UV and change the mapping scale here to 100. And basically you're going to set this up to for the normal map. So just copy the layer blend over for the normal. Copy the pixel depth and the lerp, hook that up to the layer grass, and drag in the normal map for the grass. Hook that up to the A, copy it over, hook it up to the B, and then you want to hook up the landscape coordinates to the same textures here. And probably group these together and move them off to the very back. Okay, so obviously there's a lot more layers and you're going to need a lot more room. So just take all this, move it up to the very top here. coordinates, move it to the very back. Take the normals, move it to the very bottom. And then you can also take the pixel depth and move it to the very back and bunch these textures together like so. Then basically you're just going to copy over the lerp. So we're going to copy each lerp over for each layer here and hook them all up. And then you also of course want to hook up the pixel depth offset for the alpha of each lerp. And then of course you would drag in your sand material, your sand 2 material, stone path if you have it, the hills grass, all that stuff over. Hook up all your lerps and your textures. And then of course you'd also copy over your landscape layer chords for each layer. And you can add a comment to keep everything somewhat organized. And then you're basically going to do the same for down here for your normal maps. Okay guys, so you guys just want to do that for each layer. It's basically the same thing. I'm just going to speed up the video of me doing this because it's quite tedious. Again, you would want to use material functions to clean everything up. Okay, so this is my final setup for my material. All the maps are hooked up here as you can see. So we have the sand hooked up to the sand 2 texture, the rock pathway, the hill grass. As you can see here for the hill grass, I actually use the same texture for the hill dark grass and the hill light grass. I just use a constant vector 3, multiplying that by that constant vector to give it a more yellowish tint. Of course, you can always use a different texture if you want, but again, this is just my setup. Okay, and as you see here, I also did this again. I multiplied the texture by a constant vector so we can get a different tint. Alright, I have the same setup here for my normals, and then you see I have all my texture coordinates. They're all sharing the same texture coordinates. Okay, and then you can also copy over your landscape layer blend and hook it up to the roughness. Give your metallic and specular some low values. And then for your layer blend, you just want to make all of your grass layers 0.7 roughness value. You can play around with these values later on. Okay, so once you guys are all finished setting up all of the different textures for each layer, you guys should be able to import the height maps into your level. Again, I am using the Splash example project. I have the default map comes with here. I've just deleted the default landscape and assets, excluding the ocean. Okay, so click the enable world composition in the world settings here. And then go to window levels to open the levels tab. Then click on the levels right here and click import tiled landscape. Then you're going to click on the select height map tiles and you're going to navigate to the project files that you downloaded to the multi-biome map. And then you're just going to scroll down till you find the raw 16 files. And you just want to select all of those and then hit OK. Change the empty material here to our landscape material we just created. As you can see, we will have 16 inputs here for maps, or unless you didn't add 16 layers, however many layers you had. For each one, you want to click here, for example, the grass master. You will select weight map tiles, and then you will just go to the project files and search grass master, and then Control A to select everything, and then hit OK. You're going to do this for all of the required maps. Basically, they are all the ones that I have circled here. All of the layers that are non-essential are the extras that I added here, like the sand 2, the stone path, and the dirt path. So you don't have to select any weight map tiles for those. Now as for our landscape scale, I'm going to leave it at the default settings. Now as you can see here, the current scale that it's at is it's going to create an 18 by 22 kilometer landscape. If you change the landscape scale, you're going to scale up the size of the landscape. But I have found that if you adjust the landscape scale, the component size or the resolution is going to be scaled up, so it's just not going to look the very best. Or at least there's not going to be much fidelity over painting the tiles later on. Honestly, I couldn't really find much information about the relationship of the landscape scale in regards to your tile resolution. There really isn't much information on this in the documentation. And it seems that if you adjust your landscape scale to match the appropriate scale in World Machine, it's going to scale up the landscape, but it's going to make the detail a little bit low resolution. Now I have tried upping the resolution of the tiles to something like 4000 resolution, but it really only helps a little bit in terms of scaling, and it adds obviously some more performance costs. Honestly, if you guys have any suggestions on landscape scale or any experience with this, leave it down in the comments below. I'm still trying to play around with the scale settings in regards to the resolution. Okay, so we can go ahead and just click import here. And as you can see, it's going to import everything and start painting all of the materials onto our landscape. It's going to take a little bit. Once that's all finished, you can go ahead and click on this little button that says Summon World Composition. Then you go scroll out and select your entire landscape by left mouse button, holding that down and selecting it. Then right click and click load. So you're going to load all of the tiles. You don't usually have to load your entire map at once. In fact, I don't really recommend doing so because it's just going to load your entire map into your system's memory, and usually you're not going to have the entire map ever loaded at once, especially when you're playing your game. But I just do so to get a general feel of the level. And then you can obviously make some adjustments by selecting your ocean and setting it to the correct height that it should be. We can go ahead and fly around. As you can see, there are these two gray spots on the landscape. Now this is probably due to the fact that some of the materials must have just overlapped, and so the engine probably just got confused when trying to paint the materials on here. Now obviously we can just go ahead and paint over these later on and fix that up, but for the most part everything is looking fine. You can obviously play around with the tiling with your landscape coordinates to adjust the tiling of the materials, and you can also play around with the specular roughness values in your material. So yeah guys, that's pretty much going to be it for this video. Now we covered a lot of things, and in our next videos we are going to cover even more things, such as fixing up our landscape material. Obviously this is still pretty far from being complete. We still have a lot of work to do, and we also want to add procedural foliage, grass, trees, and so on, as well as optimizing our landscape and adding landscape LODs. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a thumbs up. If you had any trouble or any confusion, leave it down in the comments down below, and you can also join the Discord and post a screenshot if you need additional help. Anyways, I will catch you guys in the next one.